realize if you're comparing it straight up with Michael Irvin's 1995 season, that's not an apples to apples comparison, right, even though he got it done in 16 games because of how much the passing rules and passing game have changed. I understand all of that. But as of right now, Lamb has 11 more catches than any receiver in Cowboys history, 48 more yards than Michael Irvin for the single season. But a couple of other things coming out of that game this past weekend is CeeDee Lamb had also put up the 227-yard game that was the most by any Cowboys player since Miles Austin in 2009. So in addition to having like an impressive compilation of statistics, he has had some amazing singular games as well.
Yeah, no, huge singular games that he's been the focal point of the offense from Dak Prescott. And Dak knows I can get him open. I can find him open. I can put it in a tight window, and still he's going to catch it and make a big play for us, and something special is going to happen. I do hate the fumble on the goal line. I'm still upset about that a little bit. It happened 2 weeks in a row where we fumbled on the goal line. And he has 3 fumbles. Out of the top receivers this league, that's the most fumbles out of any receivers, 3. But what we're seeing, we don't see from the Cowboys. They don't have these types of seasons where it's like, and we asked for it last year, make one receiver the focal point, force him the ball. We don't have to just throw it to all over the field all the time. And they said, all right, we'll show you we can do it, because Devontae Adams can get 10 catches in his sleep every day. And here's CeeDee Lamb this year with the Mike McCarthy offense. They're saying we can get 10 catches in our sleep.
You know what'll be interesting is I know they have a game this Sunday, a practice game against the Washington Can't Play Football Commanders. Is in the playoffs, will they continue to feed him the way they did against Detroit? Because that Detroit game was a correction from the Miami game.
Yep. In
the Miami game, the first 2 drives of the game, you're talking about the fumble by, I call him Daryl Johnston, but I know, or Bill Bates, but the fullback has a fumble. They go 74 yards pretty much, and then there's a fumble that Miami recovers at the 2-yard line. And then the next drive, CeeDee Lamb has 2 catches for a touchdown, the last one being a 49-yard touchdown. After 2 drives in that game, CeeDee Lamb had 5 catches for 102 yards. He had 1 catch for 16 yards. After the first 2 drives, 5 for 102, then 1 catch for 16 yards. I believe that came in the 4th quarter. I don't think he had a catch pretty much in the 2nd, 3rd, and the majority of the 4th quarter. So he only had 1 catch after that start. And I think there was a correction after the Miami loss of, why did we stop going away from CeeDee Lamb? Because I asked people who watched the All-22 and stuff, and they really didn't do much different. They got better pressure on Dak, where he might have not been able to stay on CeeDee's route long enough. But for the most part, they didn't all of a sudden roll a hard double team over there against him in the Miami game after getting off to a great start. He's had an unbelievable year. The second best wide receiver in the league this year to Tyreek Hill. I think the 3rd best receiver in the NFL, if everybody's healthy. I just think he's behind Jefferson and Hill. I'm just hoping that what we saw against Detroit, that they just keep going to him and feeding him and make the defense make a major adjustment.
And one of the things that I hope would lead more to that is, Corey, this is something that you talk about a lot, is catch efficiency per your targets. Here are all the times that CeeDee Lamb has gotten more than 10 targets, all right? Because he had a slew of games there where he had exactly 10 targets, but games where he had more than 10 targets. So you're like, hey, we're forcing you the ball no matter what. Against the Jets, 13 targets, 11 catches. The Rams, 14 targets, 12 catches. The first time against the Eagles, 16 targets, 11 catches. You see it again against the Giants, the Seahawks, and then just this past week, against the Lions, 17 targets, 13 receptions. So even in the games, to your point, Mike, where they don't move away from him at all, and they're like, forcing the ball, what happens? Nothing happens defensive adjustment-wise. He keeps catching the ball. Like, you don't see, he got 17 targets, but they only caught 9 passes. I'm not saying nothing happens defensive adjustment-wise. Right. I'm saying they still can't stop it. He keeps catching the ball.
And if I have those games right, they won all those games. I'm not 100% sure.
With the exception of the first Eagles game, yes, they did win all those games.
Thank you. So I just look at it, and
so 5-1 in those games.
I know that Bobby Belt yesterday asked Jerry Jones about, is CeeDee Lamb the guy who stirs the drink? It used to be Ezekiel Elliott. That's what Jerry used to say. And he said, well, not necessarily, because the quarterback kind of has to get the ball to the receiver, where a running back, you're kind of just handing him the ball off 20 or 30 times a game if that's your main weapon. But I do think if CeeDee Lamb has a below average game, and at this point, 5 for 100 is average. So if he does anything like that playoff, below average, below 5 catches, below 100 yards, I think the Cowboys have a great chance to lose that game. I do think he is that important. Tony Pollard, whether you think it's his fault or not, is not a good player this year. He's at best an average running back in the NFL, at best. Cooks is a nice number 2 receiver, but he's had some unbelievably great late touchdown catches here late in the season.
These last 6 games have been a huge pickup.
But I don't feel like he can totally change a game. Ferguson, really nice tight end, can't totally change a game. You know, Gallup's career's over. He's still on the team, though. Is like, you just look at the rest of the Cowboys' weapons. I'm not saying they're bad, but I'm saying CeeDee is the one that can totally change a game. And not he can change it for worse. But if you can't find him 5 to 10 times a game for 100 or more yards, I think the Cowboys are in big trouble.
The first 6 games of the year, Kevin, Chargers, up to the Chargers game.
Okay.
He had 1 touchdown in the first 6 games of the year.
Wow.
Receiving. Let's not go in, and he didn't have any rushing touchdowns. Since then, he's only had 2 games where he didn't have a touchdown. And I think did
they lose both of those games?
In the Buffalo game, he had 1 rushing touchdown, so he still got into the end zone. And then, Kevin, to go back to, it was Philadelphia, they lost that one. So he's had a touchdown in every game since then. And up to that point, I was saying, look, he's having a really good year, except for the touchdown numbers. And now he has 10. He's 3rd in receiving touchdowns this year. Add in the extra rushing touchdowns. That's 12 right there for him. So he's not just a guy that you say, we're putting him on the outside, and that's the only place that he's going to be. And people knock him for that. And I don't understand that. You have a receiver that can do all the things. He is a Swiss Army knife receiver, but he's not Wes Welker. He's like, he can go outside and beat your best cornerback in his face, or he can go get the ball in the backfield and do something special. Nobody ever knocked Deebo Samuel for that, because Deebo Samuel's tough, right? But CeeDee Lamb's doing all the same stuff and getting yards after catch as well. And now people are like, hey, let's look at Dak's numbers and the yards after catch that are happening there. CeeDee Lamb's huge in yards after catch right now because Dak is actually hitting him in stride. They made a connection this offseason that grew and worked together.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. It is weird to me that depending on which side of the narrative you're on, yards after catch are either a great asset to why you're such a good quarterback or a reason why you're not.
Yeah.
It's because I've heard that a lot against Brock Purdy. I'm not saying Brock Purdy is the greatest quarterback that's ever lived, but I don't think that yards after catch should always be counted against you.
The plays are designed for it. An example, I was watching Hard Knocks in season with the Dolphins, and Tua makes a throw that's behind Jalen Waddle, I do believe, or maybe it was Berrios. And Mike McDaniel says, this is a bad throw. And he's talking about everybody that did bad in this game. And he said, and look why. I designed this play for you to get a touchdown here. It's an 80-yard touchdown if you make that throw out in front of him instead of behind him.
Yeah.
And so that's what Dak is doing better. They connected. They worked out together in the offseason, and that is where Dak's first look is, and then it goes from there. And for the most part, it's winning. It's winning almost every time.
And to y'all's point about how good CeeDee has been this year, where he sits in the NFL. CeeDee Lamb in the NFL this year, 1st in receptions, 2nd in yards, 3rd in receiving touchdowns. He has the longest catch among the elite group of wide receivers. He has the 3rd most yards after catch. He has a 72.6 completion to target percentage, which is better than Tyreek Hill, and I think 0.1 behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, who we just saw, who's clearly an outstanding wide receiver as well. And then there's this. CeeDee Lamb has scored a touchdown, to Corey's earlier point, in 8 straight games, the longest active streak in the NFL, and just the 3rd time in the last 10 seasons a wide receiver has scored a touchdown in 8 straight games. Now, I realize one of those was a rushing touchdown, but still, along with Devontae Adams and Antonio Brown, who at the time they did it held in very high esteem.
Well, I will say that he is hot, CeeDee Lamb, because last night I watched the 5 hottest players in all of sports and their cards. Number 1's Lamar Jackson. His cards are going up tremendously. Number 5 in all sports is CeeDee Lamb. His cards are going up tremendously. So through this stretch, what he's doing is, at least by, let's say, a common fan, it doesn't have to be just Dallas Cowboy fans, but football fans in general are paying more money now to have CeeDee Lamb stuff because that's where he's at. So I do get the Richard Shermans or whoever that still don't want to give CeeDee Lamb as much credit as he deserves this year. There's plenty of people who are now spending their money and more money than they ever have to get CeeDee Lamb stuff.
So if you had CeeDee Lamb stuff before, now's the time to sell, is what you're saying.
In a way, yes.
And
I can see that.
And it goes back to Mike after draft day saying he thinks that he's going to be the best Cowboys receiver in the history of the game.
My son keeps asking me, is he better than Michael Irvin? And I said, you have to give it time.
And they're different players.
He doesn't like that answer. I'm just like, look, Michael has, I'm not saying he's going to get 3 Super Bowls. He's not. But Michael Irvin let a whole career play out. We need to let the whole career play out because at this point, we probably thought Dez was going to be better than Michael Irvin, and he didn't even come close to it, to be honest, because of his lower body injuries that he suffered. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to CeeDee Lamb, but this is his 4th year.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to play another 4 or 5 premium years, and then you can really have the discussion, hey, I think he's better than Michael Irvin, or no, I think Michael Irvin's better because of this.
I did want to point this out, Kevin. If he gets 10 receptions in the game against Washington, that'll put him at 132 this year.
Okay.
Which would still be 6th all-time in a single-season receptions year.
Wow.
Do you know who number 1 is?
It's like, is that one like 150?
Cooper Kupp or something?
Michael Thomas, 149. So he would still be 17 behind Michael Thomas. Cooper Kupp at 145. Marvin Harrison at 143 in an era where they didn't throw the football. And Antonio Brown.
Maybe as
and
Julio Jones. It wasn't
Jones.
The 50s. It was the 90s and 2000s.
That's when they were so confused because they were like, hey, hold on, what's happening? Peyton Manning keeps throwing the ball on us.